Last year's Lviv Book Forum literary festival held the elegant city in western Ukraine. Was mostly online event and was held basement lecture hall that doubled as shelter when necessary. In comparison, this year's edition had around 150 live events, and many were also available online. Some were so popular that audiences, mostly in their 20s and 30s, filled aisles and crowded around back of main venue, a beautiful 16th century powder tower that once formed part of city's arsenal. Publishers were selling books at stalls under the gentle autumn sun. An evening of poetry and live music was organized at the city's puppet theater. There was laughter. There was drinks. There were old friends to see and new friends to make. But the turn of the 12 moons also meant other, darker changes. In October 2022, at Mars Field, where Lviv's war dead are buried, I counted 153 graves of those killed since the beginning of full-scale occupation. I gave up on the heartbreaking 500 this fall. Each plot was full of flowers and filled with small offerings. Yellow and blue flags were flying at each one. Quiet clusters of family and friends, among many others, sat with their dead loved ones. In another part of city's Lychakiv cemetery, the novelist turned war crimes investigator Victoria Amelina, one of most eloquent speakers at last year's festival, is buried. Tiny yellow and pink roses bloomed on his grave, and someone had prepared a glass of champagne for him. He from his injuries on July 1st, at the age of 37, after Russians targeted a pizza restaurant in Kramatorsk, eastern Ukraine. His absence was everywhere. During much of last year's events, Ukrainian writers spoke of shock, escape, survival. To abandon novels, then temporarily take up their pens to testify, write essays, diaries. They described how escalation of Russia's war against them exploded through language, changing words and the way they understood world. Browsers at Lviv Book Forum. This time the topics deepened and expanded. In some cases they have become even more difficult. In one case, Anne Applebaum, author of the Red Famine, about Stalin's forced starvation of 4 million Ukrainians in 1932-33, suggested that supporting dissident Russians was something Ukrainians could do usefully. In response, a questioner from the audience asked who these dissidents might be, since there is little sign of their existence. Change is possible, insisted Russia's Applebaum. This seems unlikely any time soon to many Ukrainian observers, whose pedigree of post-1991 protests and grassroots action is sorely lacking in their eastern border neighbours. In such conversations, it was possible to detect a certain difference in understanding and experience between the current Ukrainians, who have been resisting for 19 months against a devastating occupation, and their most sympathetic friends. Croatian writer Slavenka Drakulić, who lived through the violent collapse of Yugoslavia, warned Ukrainians after the war, your experience